Today we're doing turd holes. This is an extension or part of a series where I'm doing some little projects for a grab bag type small pieces of wood, so you don't have to have a bandsaw or anything like that. And so we have like this larger size over here on the right. Should I flip this video over? Whatever. The bigger piece. This is the one that comes in the grab bag that I have a link for. It's just on eBay right now. The other one is one I've done in the past. It's just kind of the same ratio. It may seem like it's a huge difference in size in a grab bag, but you'll see when you see like the sides of it kind of what I mean by that. So you can kind of get a turtle out of it, and if you get close, you can see what I'm doing here. Just kind of, you basically get this mild oval out of it. And you don't have to be specific with it at all, because it's gonna get cut away before you actually get that circle or whatever. So yeah, basically you get like an oval, and then so you can get a head in there, and then some arms. And you really don't even have to do that much. You can just kind of go at an oval and then get a little bit of a head out later, because turtles have different kind of levels of peeking their heads out. They can just that little turtle head thing that they're known for. Anyway, so yeah, they're on the side there. You're gonna get just gonna do this kind of like half pod thing, and it really works out well, even without any knowledge of anatomical knowledge of turtles. It works better, I think, a lot of times if you don't actually look at any pictures of turtles. That started to mess me up on most animals when you carve. You don't actually look at a real one. Just kind of go with the idea in your head, and then just kind of make like nubs for the legs and stuff. The smaller one, I did notice it was easier to make it work, but on the bigger one, it was kind of, you can see the difference. It is maybe a little bit more fun. There's a little more some like details in there. Yeah, they don't really stand on their side, so it's how you get to see them. You'll get to see some more This is another small one. I tried to like wood burn, and it got a little bit too contrasty, but I really like what happened to his shell. It doesn't look too good in the video, but take my word for it. Yeah, I'd seen somebody else do it. I have another one. I'd done some more in the past, and I like did wood burning that wasn't as dark, and then I stained it so that it wasn't as contrasty, and it's just like a dark turtle, and he looked really nice. You're going to go ahead and just basically take this kind of slanted roof third off of each side of the top. Most of the drawing that we did, you basically just kind of figure out how thick the head's going to be, and then you start taking it off there. Depending on the wood you get, usually the grain's going to be going exactly in this direction, so you may need to go a little bit slantier, cuts a little bit like this, or rotate them, because if you're going exactly with the grain, you're going to end up splitting off more wood than you want to. We're doing like a half of a pod, half of a sphere kind of deal, so you really just start getting down to that. If the grain's growing with your cut of the wood, then really big chunks can come off. So watch that. And the way that you can get around that is you can kind of angle the knife, or you actually just go slightly against the grain. If you go straight into it, then that can cause for kind of the effect of going with the grain to basically work too well, and that's when it starts to splinter off in really large chunks. So if you need to start to control it, you just basically just do a slight diagonal. So you start to do that. Basically, you just don't want to get too carried away with all of that, because of the head is generally going to go up. On this big one, I have the head go up. On the smaller ones, there wasn't that much room, and maybe I just didn't plan it. I guess it's also the proportions, is that on this larger one, the proportions give it so that it's a little bit longer. Okay, so on the small one, there just wasn't like this room for the head to go out and then up. So on these bigger ones, there was. So I guess that's just ended up happening. So kind of do a half of the sphere, except for where that head's gonna be. And there you saw on the bottom, it's basically like what you're carving out on the sides at least. And because this is basically most of the ideas that you're just kind of going to be doing the stop cuts all along where the legs are. The legs have done in a few different styles. It was hard to tell on the smaller ones, but they were Some have been more like sea legs. I'm sorry, sea turtle legs. A little bit more like kind of going towards the back, in which case you wouldn't do as much of a stop cut there or separate it, but you'd do it maybe a little further back or just be smaller. So just think a little bit ahead. I'd suggest for your first one, just do that idea that you have in your head of like that big giant turtle where their legs are just kind of these big stalks, these big lumps, and you don't have to like articulate the anatomy. Just think of it as like if it was a piece, the clay piece, and you just had like this half circle, and then you just plopped on some little, stalk around things. Don't think about any of the upper leg or anything. Oh, see how that big chunk came off there? That was what I was talking about. It happened again right there, and there again, and that's okay because I'm taking those pieces off. But again, you see I slide it just a little bit diagonal and start to gain control again. Just to go into the grain just a tiny bit. So I do a lot of this with just a knife. It's two knives, but without tools. I do go over a little bit, tiny bit. If you had a V-tool, if you're into that, where you could use that, because this does become a little bit complicated. The project in between. Like on the front and back, in between the head and the tail, or next to the head and the tail, you're going to be going. You have to make these cuts that are going in, and it's going to be going straight into the grain. So you kind of have to finagle your way around in there with your knife, whatever you have, and you may need to design the piece around the limits of your tool. What I mean by that is that you can't have this very thin, narrow cavity in between the head and the front leg that's so narrow that you can't get your tool in there. Whatever cavities you're making or spaces you're making in wood carving, your tool not only has to fit in there. Hey, Storm, you're not in the video, but you're in the recording. A good girl. So. What are we talking about? Oh yeah, so the tool has to not only just fit in there, but it has to be able to carve in there. It has to make it a stop cut, which is even more of an angle. Storm, just sit down. Good girl. Alright, so you can see that I'm doing the head there. Okay, so the other things about the big and the small one is when it gets larger, you have to like start thinking about how the actual anatomy works and the details work. It wasn't a problem on the only place it was a problem was on the head. And it's funny because I actually went back and I found another little one, and I'd done like a really good head. And I don't know, it's just because it was so small, it was easier to do. And on the larger one, I think it just like gives you a little bit more, or at least gives me, makes me a little more overwhelmed. And I feel like I don't know, it's supposed to, that the whole head and details of the turtle are supposed to look like the whole skull. So I try to, I guess when it's larger, just try to think of it as, okay, let's just get a basic shape down and then worry about it later. And then, then add some details. But even on this one, it didn't look that great, but it works, right? You're just kind of doing, just like the leg, you're just kind of doing a lump. Their faces and heads, like there's not a whole lot there. So this is where it starts to get tricky, where you're kind of seeing me do this. And depending on your knife, the shape of it, and off screen here. The shape of it, and also like if it's upswept or not, is going to depend on how much you can dig in there and how much you can kind of pry your knife. Be gentle with your knife, not on the side cuts, but also when you're trying to get out the head and the tail. You'll really want to just kind of pry out wood, and don't do that too much. It's going to be chipping out your knife, even if you can't see it. When you're starting to hear it make those bad snapping noises, that means that your edge is going slowly, little micro chip by micro chip. So Can you guys hear Storm purring? She's so cute. We're like sitting under the cover. It's like never ending story. There's like a storm going on outside. There's a storm going on outside, and there's a storm in here. My cat's name is Storm. That's why it's funny. You rubbing your face on a microphone? Alright, so yeah, there's maybe I should speed up some of this footage since I'm talking with my cat over it. There's really not a whole lot to talk about. I could probably just do like maybe like a 5 or 6 picture kind of illustration of what the carving is, but it's always nice to see somebody work it out, you know, what's really going on. You can see this. I do a lot of these cuts, right, they maybe look whatever, like when you're actually working on it, when you're doing these cuts, I'm actually like cutting into the grain. So there's this certain, you know, as you cut into the grain, there's it's just gonna be a certain amount that the wood and the knife can handle. Again, depends on the knife, and when I say it depends on the knife, it's just gonna be like how much of a slicer the knife is, how thin it is, and you know, all knives with the way that they're shaped and everything, they're gonna be kind of, when it comes down to it, they're gonna be maybe a little bit better at some things than others. So you know, a really good slicing knife can get in there with an experienced hand, but because it's such a thin knife, it'll also be pushed by the wood and bent out of shape very quickly, and then be not pointing in the direction that it's supposed to be cutting. So you just kind of have to experiment with it, and when you're going, you know, into a cut that's going into the grain, you know, it starts to get out of control, just back out of it, you know, and then, you know, figure out a way to get through there. Okay, so we're gonna do the back here, the little back legs in a second here, and you're gonna see exactly what I'm talking about with the, right, how we kind of go at it. And basically, we're not there yet. You can kind of, you lay down the knife, so you're gonna have this like kind of, you know, if you had a chart of where like the blade would start to cause problems. Here we go, right here. So we're basically going against the grain and into it right here, but we can get a little bit, we can get a tiny bit in there, and we just keep stacking up those little feather cuts, and then we can get that V cut out of there. And so you just kind of have to mess with that, try not to get too frustrated, and you know, again, you know, you just have to go back. If you start getting messed up, you know, don't force it, back out of there, and then make a cut that's, you know, not as steep. And then cut out kind of the places that you've made. You can see there it wasn't going, so I just kind of went back in from the side. That one wasn't going, so I went in a little bit more shallow. And it's just kind of a never-ending game of that. But it's really good practice. And you just take your time with it. If you do have a chisel around, you know, that's where you can do a lot of it. But this is a nice project that you can do with just a knife. And if you're having serious problems with like doing any of these kind of cuts that are against the grain, then you need to look into sharpening your tool, or, you know, go grab an X-Acto blade, which is going to be sharp. It's just not going to be able to make as thick of cuts. But yeah, you can see here, this is an upswept knife, so it works well in a lot of those situations because it doesn't have to just go straight. You can kind of have a trajectory that's a curve with that knife, a little sweep, and that can, it's a little bit safer to do that than with a straight knife where it's just going to be going deeper and deeper if you've messed up, you know, or you have to make a V cut that's of this specific perfect angle. When you have that upswept cut knife, you can just kind of, I don't know, chip away at the cuts that you're making. So yeah, in general, in the beginning, when I was teaching and just doing my own wood carving, I didn't understand why people sold so many upswept knives. I still, you know, would not suggest them like super early in your wood carving. You don't get it for your first knife. And this one's actually, this is a safe one because it's not it's not very upswept. It's got a lot of flat spot on it, and it's a very gentle sweep. You can see and it's very hard to tell the difference between which one's which. So on these, I always put my thumb on the wrong side. And for me, just because of the way I sharpen my the angles, are always going to be a little bit like steeper on my straight knife. You can see I'm using there. It seems to be cutting nicer, and basically it is set up to be sharper. But again, because I'm sweeping the upswept knife, like I'm curving it, I don't want it to be as quote-unquote sharp, so that it can take that kind of prying, that curve, without chipping out that edge as much. Okay, so if you are going to have some other tools around, you have your V tool. That's what you'd be doing instead of all these cuts that I'm talking about, and that's maybe what you want to do. Make things a lot easier. At the same time, it's kind of I guess if you had a detailed one, you'd get in there, but it's going to be a little bit limited once you get into those detail spots, depending on how much of a crevice you want to have come out or in between like the head and the legs. Basically, what I'm saying is the V tool doesn't, it only gets so thin, and it can only get so deep into a crevice. And if you have a fine knife, or if you switch over to your hobby or X-Acto knife, you can get a very deep, thin crevice that no V tool is going to be able to get into. So, and here I'm using just I think it's a 9 sweep, and it's going to have the same effect, like just if you didn't want to dig out all that wood in the beginning, which I don't know, you do want to. That's where you want to get all the practice in. And I kind of enjoy that, especially now, if you do have a sharp knife, getting out that cross grain cuts, kind of going against, the physics of the wood a little bit. So here we go here. Yeah, so you can see I'm going straight into the grain. You can see there where it works is just because it's going a little bit sideways. That did work. Okay, so here I'm going to illustrate for what I was doing there, because you're going to bring the bottom of the head up, because if the legs weren't there, that's what it would look like. Kind of. It's a bad head there, but you can't see it because the legs are there. But basically somewhere in between these two, where your blocks for the legs are, you're going to have a place that goes up, and then have the head. Again, this is on like the larger piece of wood. If you have room for a head, you can do that. Otherwise, you just make the head the same as the legs, where it's just like a little lump coming out. So back to these, this whole idea of these projects is that you have, a project to do from pieces of wood that you can get, either in a grab bag or from a store somewhere, or they're from like a square shape. You don't need a bandsaw to cut it out. Here I'm showing the kind of different legs. This is kind of the sea turtle legs, that kind of go to the sides. And I actually do that a little bit anyway. I think about that, because I think all the turtles kind of do that. Like they're like, even if they have the lumpy legs, like what I'm doing right there, they still kind of go back a little bit. They have this little bit of like a backwards V shape, like a chicken wing, a very thick chicken wing shape. And what was I saying? Anyway, yeah, so the project, so if you don't have these specific, this specific grab bag, or the other one that I showed, that hopefully you can get a piece of wood and get similar results. You can split basswood, okay. So, if you have a piece that, say, it looks like it's flat enough to do the turtle, but it's, it's a square, then, you shouldn't have to whittle off, whittle it into a rectangle shape. You should be able to, if you have some sort of a very small hatchet, or even, like a knife that you don't care about, you can place it on there and hit the back of it with something, and it should split straight down the grain pretty easily. And even without that, if you just need to bring down, you just whittle down the excess wood into the shape that you want, or play around with it. You know, spread out their arms more. But yeah, I guess I'll give, if you guys want, I'll do an illustration of this one as well and put it on my blog. I'll put a link below, and I'll do one for the big size and the small size. And again, the sizes were different, so it's not just the sizes were different. It's just on the bigger one, you have more room to mess around, I guess. And you see on like this one, I think that I didn't have to maybe bring the shell in all the way. Like there's definitely some design choices that I could have made different to either make the turtle look larger or smaller, or I guess maybe make the body of the turtle larger or smaller to make the arms kind of work better, or just like in a different style. Yeah, I guess if you want to do a full-on sea turtle, you would need more of a square for sure, because he'd have to go out on the side, or he'd just have to be a much smaller turtle. But if you tried to do this to the sea turtle, you maybe want like a harder wood, because it'd get pretty thin. There's some very fragile wood for the fins and stuff. So this feller's getting close. You know, it's most of this is just working out the shapes, but you know, you just keep in mind as you're working along there, you know, don't get too caught up in the complexities of the anatomy of the turtle or anything. Again, it's just, you're just shooting for this, you know, half sphere with kind of a blob on each corner. And yeah, you can keep the bottom of it, the bottom of the wood. We do carve it a little bit at the end. You can keep that flat, so you can have like that drawing, so that from the top you know kind of where the arms you wanted those to go in the beginning, where they wanted to go into, and you know, from the top it's just kind of this practice of rounding everything over. And then I guess the arms are kind of like halfway down, right? Because like you don't have the arms coming from the top. You round over the shell until about halfway down, and then the arms start. But again, it depends on the style of the legs. You might want them to go back up a little bit. I think this guy has that a little bit. So at this point, I'm gonna speed up the footage a little bit, because I'm getting bored watching this. I don't know, are you guys? I feel bad always putting up these like super long videos, even though it's kind of why I started. It's because I didn't like that people would put up videos where it was like some guy would go into like a artist studio, and then they'd be like, the piece would be basically done, and then they'd be like just touching the piece with like something like another piece of wood. Wouldn't even be like a tool cutting it. They'd just be like too afraid to mess it up on camera. Alright, now we are blasting through to the future in our fast forward film. So hopefully you guys don't lose too much information here. You can still kind of see what's going on. I didn't speed it up completely. Basically see me kind of working at these little V-cuts, and maybe it can kind of give you a bit more of an understanding, because there is something that when you're carving yourself or watching somebody carve, that you lose the subjectivity of what's supposed to happen in the shapes. And I talk about that a lot in my other like wood spirit carving videos, where there's a difference between this, the ones that I do in 30 minutes and the ones that I have to edit and they're still an hour long. That when you're doing this kind of stuff, if you stay on focus on one spot too much, before you get the main shape down, then you can end up with these blobs and you get kind of lost. Your brain can only model so much, and it can only hold that model for so long. So you kind of have to shoot for different small goals of, let's get this basic shape out, let's get this basic shape out, and then later go in and work on little details and stuff. There I'm doing a little bit of V-tool, and I guess actually, I was saying that you could use a V-tool. I'm not sure how much you could use it on that smaller piece of wood from the other like grab bags, but certainly an option. It's a good, because it's such a simple project. It's a good one to just try to do with a knife and try to deal with the challenges of in between going against the grain on both ends, and then also in between the legs and the head. So here you can see I'm starting to shape the arms a little bit. I do them a little bit different on each one. Again, I try not to look at a real turtle, because as soon as you do that, you're going to be like, oh man, this turtle doesn't look like any real turtle, and all this other stuff. But sometimes when you try to make something look a little bit too real, like a real turtle, basically, whatever idea you have for a turtle without looking for one, that's going to be the archetypal, symbolic turtle that just about everybody's going to have in their mind. So that's what you want to kind of make. And looking at pictures of real ones sometimes is going to mess that up. Or it's gonna make you go after some weird stuff. It's not gonna work out. And if it's the symbol in your mind of the turtle, then it's already going to be like a kind of averaged shape. Shapes that aren't too complex. It's going to simplify it, I guess, already. So the tail, by the way, which you see I'm working on there, it's a little weird. It is. They don't really have much of tail, and I'm not sure if you're going to even see it on a lot of them. It was just, again, on this ratio specifically, I hadn't had to deal with the tail on the little ones too much. These are just a little bit longer. Alright, so you'll notice a change in the sound. I can't get my microphone to work properly, so we're using another one. Sorry if it doesn't sound so great. Where are we here? So we're about to split the shell up here in a second here. Alright, I'm working on my little crappy tail there. Oh, right, I was talking about that before. So if you're going to make it look thin, I don't know what turtle tails look like. You just want to keep it like wrapped on itself or attached to the body. You can make things small and thin and dainty as long as they're still attached to things. Like if you're going to make the legs are thin, more like a sea turtle, it's very thin or whatever, then you basically, if it was like a chicken wing, as long as it was closed, you could have it look like a chicken wing. You could describe it, in a round fashion so that it looked like it was three-dimensional. It was actually a very dainty thing. As long as it's still folded and it's got these fibers attaching it to itself in the middle, it has much more strength than if you do separate it. So I do the bottom here a little bit, and then I start working on splitting the shell. So the symbol that I was talking about, I don't look at like real pictures of turtles. Really where the idea mostly comes from for these is basically from Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, growing up, and those kind of ideas, which none of them are really real turtles. But then also, like when I'm doing the split here, when I'm doing this splitting of the shell, I think about doing Super Mario Brothers, the turtle shells that get thrown at you. And I guess, the people the Bowser wears a turtle shell and stuff, and I don't know, am I talking to the wrong generation here about Super Mario Brothers? But it was a simplification of the shell that is really good to think about while you're doing this stuff. There's this lip. There's a split in the shell, first of all, that goes all around the side of the turtle, basically, and it will. It's like a clam, and it goes around the arm, leg, everything that comes out, appendage that comes out, it goes around, and there's a lip that's kind of on each side of the shell where it meets up, and each one of those is going to go up and around, the arm and the head. It gets a little difficult in this one because I have a very large lip. It's a little bit overly accentuated, and so it's hard to get it to come down in between the head and the arm, and that's fine. I think a lot of times that there's actually space anyway. That the turtle kind of has this nakedness in between his arms and his head, that the shell doesn't actually touch again in between there. but I think it depends on the species. I'm not sure. Um, Again, just go with whatever works with the size that you're going with, and it will look fine. It's this little lip though, and the split of the shell is a nice detail. And then past that is, of course, you do the soccer ball type thing that's on the top, and if you want, you can do it on the bottom, but it's not really a soccer ball type thing. So in this one, I just do a little bit of texture for the bottom, and I do kind of a bit of soccer ball on top. I had some issues on the first ones. I think I tried to do again. I looked at a picture because I was like, "What is the shape in the pattern on the top of a turtle shell?" And I looked at the pictures, and it really screwed me up. So on this one, I just kind of went with, you basically go for a top one or two top shapes, which are either octagonal or pentagonal or whatever it is, and then you just kind of try to geometrically make the points go out from there. We're not even at that point in the video, but at this point, I'm still separating the these kind of this shell. You know, I guess when turtles are served as food, you serve them turtle on a half shell. I'm not sure if that's a real thing. I think that's actually oysters, and they made jokes about it with turtles in the show. Never mind. So you want to spend some time describing this kind of split in the shell and the lips on kind of each side of that. That's it, not just that, but the depth that so the legs look like they're going inside of that shell, right? That they're not just coming out. So that when the line that split gets to the each leg or appendage, it opens up some, and there's a bit of depth, and you see that leg goes in a little bit, right? And not too much. Don't get too carried away, but just a little bit will accentuate like that. This is we're making a 3D object, so you want to make things overlap, and you want to make things look like they're coming out of other things. So that's kind of where you get that. Also on this one, I'm kind of doing the top of the shell finally. I think it's still been flat a little bit to some point. You know how the shape of the turtle shell is going to depend on the ratio of the wood, the proportions of the wood. You know, the smaller ones I think he looked like he had a higher shell. And turtles they vary very much on how high up their shell goes. There's the very old turtles that are very large, and you know their shell goes up very high, and then there's sea turtles on kind of the opposite end that you know they're very thin. They're not very tall. So you can kind of see what I'm doing here, I guess. Hopefully, you see it at the end. It doesn't really make sense if you're wondering. Again, the geometry, as I was speaking of earlier, kind of what happens with the lines, and it doesn't really need to. And I would suggest doing that part with, if you do it with a straight bladed knife, it'll give it a little bit more straight qualities. It's easier to get a straight line because they're gonna feel organic because they're made by hand, and so if you do it with a V tool, they're gonna get like more and more like soupy looking and mottled. So what was I going to say? You know, I started thinking about is that there was turtles. They don't know how old some of the turtles can get because basically we haven't been studying them for long enough. Like some of these giant turtles that get really old. They found turtles that some of these giant turtles are they tortoises? Some of these giant turtles in America have they found one with a Civil War bullet, a musket ball in its shell. And so that was kind of like the first, like they don't have any way to tell how old these things are. Carbon dating's not that very specific. So that was kind of one of the clues that they were like, holy crap, these things are living for over 100 years, and if this one's lived this long, then I don't know. So this guy's basically done. Kind of. Wait, what was going on there? Okay, here we go. Kind of showing off. Again, I just kind of did a textured bottom, but if you want to look, they do have a bit of like a pattern that's kind of close to the top that some of them have on the bottom, and that works out too, but depends on what's going to happen with your shell. I thought that was too textured, so I flattened them out a little bit. So there's also this thing at the end here that I do. There's a few times in here I do this to make sure it didn't look like it came from a block. That it was just that this is the design I wanted and could have come out in its size shape. You want to watch for that when you make things out of a block. And make sure that it doesn't look like it came from a block. Somewhere in there at the end you'll see if you look at it from certain angles or whatever, you still see those flat spots, and it's still, you know, if you can see a description of the cube that it used to be inside of, then, you know, try to round those little pieces out a bit more. It's also hard to say, you know, I'm doing this top of the shell. You know, do these plates, are they, you know, are they just like painted on? You know, how you want to describe those is up to you. And this guy, I don't paint. It might be a good idea to do one. He could maybe use some staining and maybe, you know, put some dark. I don't have some of the other turtles that I've done, unfortunately. I just had that wood burned one. But did I show the wood burned one? Maybe I did in the beginning. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, you can do wood burning on these guys and then kind of stain them down. I did talk about that. Anyway, so on this one it's basswood. The finish I usually do is just, you know, a tung oil finish, something like that, where a tung oil finish is something that won't stay on top of the wood. Basswood has a tendency to soak up the first layer of stuff that you put on there, and it'll still be furry looking. And you have this, it's a huge problem basically, and because you can't have something on top of it and it keeps looking furry, it's just so porous that it's hard to get something to not stay on top of it but still be on that top layer, so that it doesn't have this like fuzzy overlay. This stuff works out pretty well. And I'm not sanding, so that kind of changes it too. If when you sand and you put a finish on, there's this thing that happens called raising the grain, and the grain, actually a bunch of the, you basically have to mow the grass. A bunch of the fibers that were not cut off from the sanding will have to come down. Oh, I have to make a little adjustment there. I'm not sure what that was. Yeah, oh, I didn't clean them out very good. I should have cleaned them off with a toothbrush. There's some like little chunks of wood in there and stuff. And you gotta get all that out of there before you start putting this finish on there, or else it's gonna be stuck on there forever. Or you'll pull it off later and it'll be like a dry spot, or it'll rip out some. Well, this is some exciting footage here. Probably should have edited before I did the voiceover.
Alright, I think we got our blue snowball back. That's at my microphone. Alright, so we're back in frame as well. And we're just making sure to get in all these little crevices. You can see his, I did leave a bit of a tail there. I don't know, it makes me really wonder now about how much tail turtles have. Don't seem right now that I'm looking at it. Don't seem right at all. Don't seem natural. So yeah, you might need to do 2 coats of tung oil. You just check that out after it dries, or maybe after a certain amount of time. And I think he definitely could have used an antique finish, which you'll see in, I think I have a separate video for my antique finish, but it's in a few of the wood spirit videos as well. Yeah, you can see I really didn't even do much of his face or head at all. It just kind of left him a little bit bland. I don't know. I maybe could have painted him. I feel like I need to do like more turtles and then maybe kind of work out, you know, what should happen with them. It maybe would have been a really good project to do with a darker wood like walnut, which is too dark for most projects. So, well, so that's just about it. He's just a bit light. I really should have done him in the walnut or darker wood. Or should you guys, you know, maybe an anti-aging process on this guy. He will darken over time. You know, you can see these darken a little bit. I ended up changing his face a little bit. We're going to see some stills here right now. And I actually ended up painting both of the turtles. I'd had a few beers and I was like, you know, I think I'll paint them like the Oaxacan type of animals. And I just totally ruined both of them. As happens a lot of times when I paint my wood carvings, but especially with small stuff like this. But I think we could have maybe just gone with like a simple stain on top for his shell, something a little bit lighter for his body. Would have been great. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed and carve safe. And here's a picture of my cat Storm.